My name is Dre. Quick introduction. I'm a customer success engineer at Moveworks, and I'll be leading this Creator Studio weekly webinar series, at least for the time being. So, just as a brief introduction of what this looks like and what things will be like going forward. Weekly, we're aiming to have a session covering a use case. We'll spend the first portion of the time covering this use case, how to set it up, what the architecture of that use case might look like, and maybe different modifications that might apply to your organization. And then we'll follow that up with a Q&A session where we can have questions about the use case that we're talking about or really anything adjacent to that. So just briefly, some of the sessions that are coming up, I want to go over are the Microsoft MFA resets, utilizing Creator Studio as the launching platform for those resets. Some next level Slack channel administration techniques, such as renaming Slack channels, RAG and online search with Perplexity, SharePoint site search and filtering, and then finally on our current schedule is the ServiceNow approval reminders, a very common ask from our customers. Today, in particular, we'll be discussing JIRA approvals with Creator Studio. So once again, welcome to the folks who have joined us for our inaugural a webinar for these Creator Studio series. Let's go ahead and jump into the JIRA approvals use case. So with regards to JIRA approvals, this is particularly powerful of a concept using Creator Studio, given the sort of vast capability of customization for your specific business processes as far as approvals go. Given that these are highly customizable, there are a couple of different ways to do this. We're going to focus on particularly using a JIRA workflow designer automation to sort of facilitate the logic behind this use case. And we'll also discuss a few other ways potentially of doing this if you don't have JIRA workflows. So the first thing I want to do is just sort of talk about the overall architecture and the process that takes place for JIRA approvals broadly with respect to Creator Studio. So again, this diagram is assuming the use of JIRA workflows. And so with that in mind, when a ticket is created that an approval is required for, the workflow should trigger on that new approval required ticket, and then use the events API to deliver the notification to each of the approvers who are required to approve. There are some additional follow-up options that you could configure outside of just delivering that notification. But the most simple version of this use case is to deliver a link to the approval notification directly in a browser. Even this alone is enough to speed up the response time on these approvals dramatically, at least in our experience. Additionally, you could add a follow-up action with the events API that would then trigger the JIRA API for both an approve or rejection selection from your approver. Before I move on, also, I want to mention again, so I've said this a few times, this is using JIRA workflows in this particular diagram. The same concept could be applied if you're using any other iPaaS or automation tool. What that would look like instead is, instead of triggering on ticket creation in JIRA, you would probably be building something like a polling system that pulls for new tickets that are created that have an approval required. And then the rest of the diagram applies, sending that notification to your end user, either delivering just a link to the approval ticket in a browser, or providing a follow-up action directly in chat, allowing the user to stay within chat while approving or denying. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide here. So I actually have two user experiences that I wanted to show. So one for the simplistic case and one for the more complicated case. In this case, you can see that the approval notification has been configured with just 4 fields. I personally have found while working with customers that these 4 fields tend to be the most relevant in most cases. So that would be the ticket ID, so that the user knows what to look for or can look it up in the browser if they need more information. The requester name, that just helps them understand who's making this request. The description of the approval request. So oftentimes this is a request type in JIRA. So new laptop request in this scenario. And finally, a business reason. This can most often be a free text input that a user would supply while submitting that initial request. And it can really be anything here. Once again, the beauty of using Event Studio is that this is fully customizable. So if there are additional fields that are relevant for your particular business process, feel free to add those into your notification. This all gets formatted within your JIRA workflow or iPass tool. Lastly, in this particular user experience, you'll see the click here to approve or reject. This click here message would be a hyperlink that delivers the user to the browser. I did allude to this earlier and even spoke to it. You can get a little bit more complicated here. And this is sort of what that more complex experience would look like. It's the same notification in this case with the same 4 fields, again, customizable, but this time leveraging a follow-up action, which calls the JIRA API directly to either approve or deny the ticket, depending on how you are leveraging that. So JIRA does have a concept of approvals that you could leverage in this case and call an API to approve or deny that way. This also would work for custom fields. If you have some sort of custom approval process that it's leveraging, say, a custom field with a list of approvers there, you could leverage that instead, submitting an update to that ticket to say approve or deny based on the approver selection. Also note that the user doesn't have to click the button in this case. They can just say, I'd like to approve. The bot's going to understand that. So we sort of maintain that natural language feel and environment, if you will, in this user experience. In the simplistic case, this is what your events API request body would look like. You can kind of see here, hopefully you can see my mouse. If not, I'll just talk sort of through it. Anytime you see double curly brackets in this example of the request body, these are what I would call variables or replaceables. In this context, the ID would need to be added as part of the workflow. Again, the subject person's name would be added as part of the workflow, the approval description and the business reason added as part of the workflow, and finally delivered to the recipient whose email address is added to the recipient's list. I did mention just then that it's a recipients list. So you could configure this to use many different approvers. If you have an approval ticket that needs 4 or 5 different approvals or needs to be delivered to 4 or 5 different approvers, you can add all of them to the same notification. As this is sort of name agnostic, the bot is able to add this, hey, whoever your name is, hey, approver, to the message as part of a configuration within Events Studio. So there's no need to add their name specifically to this message while still allowing it to be personalized. Finally, this is the more complex case. How do you actually deliver the information required, the state information for the approver to be able to approve or deny that ticket? You can utilize this context slot down here. So you have this context object with this sub-object slots. And within this, you can define what we call slots. You can think of these as like variables that you can then leverage later on in your event API call that is at the end of the follow-up actions, if you will. The user clicks approve, for example, and then the ticket ID is added to that endpoint, the JIRA endpoints. That way it knows what ticket it's approving. So that sort of covers I'll say the use case overview portion of this call. So before we move on to the Q&A section, I do want to share a few additional learning resources you might find useful in building your own use cases going forward. The first of these is our Creator Studio Development Certification. You can find this on our Academy portal. This is a really great resource with many different training modules and certifications that you have access to. Specifically to this webinar, the Creator Studio Developer Certification provides guided training modules, step-by-step videos, as well as a certification you can actually share on LinkedIn to prove your knowledge and skill with Creator Studio. I think this is a really cool resource that we provide, so I wanted to share that one first. Additionally, we have some perhaps more, I'll say, traditional resources. We have a developer community portal. This is something that I'm actually personally in quite often. And so if you want to reach out with any questions, feel free to reach out to me on the developer community. And not only can I reply to your questions there, but also our customers and project managers, and really anybody with an interest in developing Creator Studio use cases or Moveworks, generally speaking. You can get in contact with them there. Finally, we have tutorials, use guides, an API tester, and many other resources all on our developer portal. You can find that. We'll share a link with that later. But this developer portal is the sort of the official documentation, if you will, for how to use Creator Studio and other Moveworks tools.
At this time, we'll go ahead and conclude the session. So, Dre, thank you for presenting, and we appreciate all of your attention. As a quick reminder, we'll be doing this webinar again next week, same time, same place. Look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you, everyone.